There you go.
Okay, so I'm Pat Spark, and many of you know me. And the subject of this is working with recycled fabrics in our felting, which I think a lot of us have done over the years. It was a natural for me to put this together for this particular lecture. And Flora is going to run the PowerPoint, and that'll get us started. I hope. I've been felting since 1975, so I've tried a lot of different things over the years. And I started off using nylon and cotton. Okay, so can we make that?
Yeah, I need feedback. What you see?
Yeah.
Do you see the slideshow?
I don't. I see the enable editing view, not the slideshow.
Mm-hmm.
But,
yeah, we had that same problem last time. Okay, once more.
I believe it's that little icon on the bottom right.
The problem is it goes right into whole screen, and I fixed it last time. Okay, I know.
we did practice this, guys, beforehand.
Yeah. Is it?
There. Woo!
Okay.
Yay, Flora. Yay. Can people hear me now? Flora, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so this is the title of this is, as you can see, recycling, finding inexpensive printed fabric for laminated, felting and decorating felt. Now, why did I say printed fabric? It's because you can buy plain white fabric and dye it in colors. So I've always been liked searching for something with a print on it to give a little jazz to my felt. So that's why this is about the printed fabrics. Next.
All right.
So why is fabric even used in felt making? We want to add stability to felt. If you have ever made a super thin piece of felt that was not with fabric, you'll find that in order to get stability for it, it has to be very, very stiff. And so it's not flexible enough for the garments we want to wear. It could be quite lovely, but it's stiff. So when we started figuring out to add fabrics to them, that enabled us to make something that was thinner, but also strong and flexible at the same time. So it has flexibility and it has strength and is stable. And the other thing we like to do with fabrics is that they add a different sheen to the surface, and they add a texture and a pattern to the surface. Wool fiber, oftentimes, not all wool fiber, but quite a bit of wool fiber, especially the finer fibers, merino, for instance, is a matte surface. And so when we use a shiny fabric, we can add some texture difference and interest. Next. So a lot of us learned from Polly Sterling the breath test, which is to hold the fabric up to your face and blow through it. And if your breath comes out on the other side, it will probably attach to your felt. And that's really fine. That's a good thing to do. Next. So if you go to a thrift store, you'll find some fabrics that would probably work with this test. Cotton voile. A lot of those, those skirts from India, those cotton, very thin cotton skirts, they're a type of voile. Cotton gauze, cotton scrim, habitai, page, gauze, silk gauze, polyester lace knits. Polyester knits felt in usually very well. Polyester type fabrics that are decorated type of evening fabrics with roses and beads and so forth on them. They felt in usually. Viscose woven fabrics oftentimes felt in, so do the knits, and then woven wools or knits will also oftentimes felt in if they follow the breath test. Next. So I'm just going to show you a few samples from the work of Tash West. She's one of my favorite felt makers, actually. And she and I roam the thrift stores of Oregon, finding wonderful fabrics and have a good time doing it. So this is one of her pieces called Portraits, and she's using Indian cotton skirt fabric. And let's go to a detail so you can see how she's doing that. Next, please.
Okay, cool. Let's see.
So there's a detail from this piece, and you see the printed fabrics being felted in around the edges of that portrait. Next.
Yeah, this is cool. Right? Tyler, got the tomatoes.
Okay, there's a noise happening from someone. Someone needs to. This is called Woman with Fish on Her Head. Also, I love these. Next. And this is one of the things that Tash does a lot of. She sells in different venues, and this is what you can tell. You can really see these skirts here. This is from one of those Indian cotton skirts, and she has carefully cut it up in such a way as to get this nice mitered edge and so forth on and to accent the pattern of the border print. Next. This is a piece that I actually made in a class with Polly Sterling, and it's a collage, and I was using polyester knit and a recycled silk, kind of heavily woven silk shirt, also from the thrift store. And I just call it Fiesta, but let's go to the next one. I want to show you some, yeah, so this is samples from that piece. And what I was really interested in was having different colors of wool underneath my fabric, so that the colors would come up through and have a contrast to the colors that were in the background of the felt. So underneath each spot of fabric was a different color wool. And interestingly enough, I just picked it by color. I did not pick it by fiber itself, the type of fiber. So I was using merino, 22 micron merino, and except for I needed a certain color, and so I pulled this stuff out of my stash, and it turned out to be Corriedale. And so you can see where that, and I put fiber around the edge of the cut pieces. You can see where the Corriedale felted more slowly than the merino, so it did not come in and grab the polyester. So the only place that turquoise balloon is held down is around the very edges. It did not get the fiber coming through, whereas the very same polyester fabric up above in the pink did come through because it was the merino. And then down below in the lower right is the heavy silk that the fiber came through. Next. So this is a piece with the decorative evening fabric. It's just a sample, but if you can find something that has a lacy background and flexible enough, you can get it to felt down to your wool. Next. So this is a collar I made, and it has pieces from different prom dresses and stuff in it. And it has like some of those roses I made out of silk habitai, but some of them are pieces of commercial fabric that were in dresses from the thrift store. Next. This is just showing a very early piece of mine, 1978, when I was making a transition actually from being a weaver to a felter. And so I was doing felts about weaving, and this happens to be some scraps of Pendleton wool that I had that I felted into the surface. Next. And this is a piece from the 90s. And in this one, I'm using nylon gauze all the way through it. And it's hard to tell, but if you look up in the upper right-hand corner, for instance, There's some red that's over, looks like it's a red shapes up in the upper right-hand corner. And those are red nylon gauze. And then knowing that it's transparent, you can look all through this piece and see areas of transparency where I have layered the nylon gauze over the top of other things, pre-felts and so forth. Let's go to the detail of this. This is called Vortex Times Flower. Okay, and this one then you can see the nylon gauze. It is the black, and then in some cases there's one. I had a nylon. I found a good one at a thrift store, that a nylon gauze scarf that went from pale like a white into a red, and so I have some of that in there. So it's like a graduated color change. It's a very subtle thing. You can even see in part of it in the upper right corner there, you can see the edge of the scarf makes a black line. It's very subtle, but I'm also putting that scarf over the top of silk paper images and pre-felt images that were cut out, as well as just some wet fleece areas. Next. But what if you're going to buy this stuff online? How do you know if the fabric will work if you can't do a breath test? So some tricks. Here we go. Next. I buy on eBay, and I buy used sarees. And there's a lot of yardage in a saree. And they're about 5 yards long. They're approximately 45 inches wide, sometimes 40 inches wide, but close enough to 45. And you can get it for a relatively good price. So you can get a lot of printed fabric for inexpensively. However, do never ever buy art silk. That sounds like something wonderful. What it really means, it's a marketing name for artificial silk, and it's usually rayon acetate. And I have such a hard time getting acetate to felt down. You know, maybe I could use some tricks on it, prick it with some holes or something to get it to go, but it just isn't, it isn't good for me to work with. So you can search under several names. You want to use vintage, old, used, saree. There's two ways of spelling saree, one with an I, one with two E's. You can, you want to include the term 100% or pure silk, and words like chiffon, lightweight, thin, gauze, soft fabric, tissue, georgette. For felting, I like to have the lighter weight silks, but how do we figure this out beyond the fact of using those names? Next. It helps to know that with Japanese and Chinese textiles, they're sold by something called a mummy weight, and that is abbreviated as MM. And that weight is taken from, if you have 100 yards of that fabric, and it's 45 inches wide, what is that? Whatever that weighs in pounds is that weight. So if you had, if you buy a mummy weight silk habitai at 8 mummy, it means that originally that 100 yards of that fabric weighed 8 pounds. So if it was 45 inches wide. So now so what can we do with that? We like to use oftentimes mummy weights of 3 to 8 mummy. It's not unusual. And it's also, I've also worked up to 12, probably even greater than that mummy. As you go up in mummy weight, the fabric itself is heavier. So it's like the difference between making something that is a lightweight scarf out of a 3 mummy and going up to the higher mummies, something that is more coat weight, heavier, or a blanket weight. So since the sarees are 5 yards long and they're between 40 and 45 inches wide, we can figure it out if we know the weight of that saree they're selling on eBay. Next. So this took me forever to figure out because I'm not a mathematician. And my husband is a mathematician, but I wouldn't let him give me formulas and stuff because, you know, that is just too difficult for my brain. So I figured out that 5 yards is 1/20th of the 100 yards that's normally used to figure mummy. So that if you convert the gram weights, because I usually sell things from India, for instance, that's where I get sarees, is from India. They sell them in gram weight. You convert it to ounces, you multiply it by 20, and that would give you that 100-yard weight. Then you divide that by 16, which is the ounces in a pound. You'll figure out the weight in pounds, and that's the mummy weight. So I've got a few written down there. And we'll try to post this somewhere so some people can really see this. But I'm usually searching for something around 200 grams close to 200 grams, sometimes a little bit over, but try to be 200 or less grams when I'm looking for a saree to be able to felt with. Next. So this is typical of what they will look like. This is one of the companies I really like working with, Sanskriti Vintage Sarees. And sarees have a whole printed area, and then they have an area that has a border print on it. When they come, go next, please. When they come, I've circled here, but that's the weight, and I actually can't read it. 195 grams. This particular scarf or saree that's for sale right now, 195 grams. And that would be probably really great. And I oftentimes will buy these printed ones because then I'll even over dye them if I want to have a variety of colors, because, you know, 4 or 5 yards of the same print is kind of difficult. But you do have that border area, which is different, but matching in color to the rest of the area. Next. So even it shows that it's been 195 grams, which that one would be between 8 and 10 mummy, which is, you know, a lot of people wouldn't work with that. But what they don't show on there, and I'll show this afterwards, because I have a new saree a used saree I just got from India from this company. But they're sold with their kick panel, and this adds to the weight. The kick panel is a panel of cotton sewn onto the bottom all the way around the saree. So not all the way around, but around where the person, the size of the person, going around the person's body. So that they can not ruin the edge as they're walking. So I've gone up to even 230 grams, and even though it is heavier, by the time I take that kick panel off, it is much lighter. And I have to say, I have not waited after I've taken the kick panel off. I'm usually just so excited to start working with it that I throw it in the washer, and after I've taken the kick panel off, and just start using it. So I don't know that exactly, but anyway, I'm sure that adds some weight to it. So I'd go up to about 230 grams or so. Next. These are some studies using various types of saree fabrics. I do lots of studies. I mean, I'll get a fabric, and I will do little studies to figure out how it's going to work. There's showing some pleats and some other things on the one on the right. Next. And this is a scarf I made using a saree fabric on the surface. It's actually the same one that's in that, the colors in this one are just quite different than what they were in that previous slide. But I used a relatively plain, it was a beige color with little black dots on it, or little black designs on it, and I felted it into a grid scarf. And then afterwards I shiburi dyed it, using a Arashi shiburi, in order to get a little bit more interest, I don't know, just to give it a little bit more oomph. It was kind of a plain looking scarf. Next. And here's a work by Flora using used saree silks. And she loves the metallic woven embellishments along the edges. And in this piece, she felted that in. This is called Dance of Colors 3. Next. Okay, so there are other vendors who buy sarees and cut them up into pieces. there used to be several of them. Right now, because of the pandemic, I could only find one when I was putting this show together, and that is Cat Fluff. And they are both on Etsy as well as Artfire. And she actually puts together packages that say that they are for Nuno felting. There's probably other vendors who do this now, but I don't know them. And like I said, the other vendors that I did know are no longer on Etsy, so I'm not sure what's going on. Next. So this is how it would look if you were going to Cat Fluff. Nuno felting supply of silk used for saris, and you would get, I think you get 5 saris for $85. And she would send you a variety. Yes, next. This just talks about the details of that. Let's see. Oh no, she's pulled 20 saris for that. Well, that's amazing. So next. So there are some other tricks. If you have for instance, if you have a densely woven fabric, and I used to do this with silks as well, but recently I read or I saw a online tutorial by Ala Kaleji, and she did something called felted socks for TV Felt Online, you know, the Russian company that sells videos in English, and she used cotton fabric to make socks, and they were pretty amazing. So if you go next, I'm using a size 38 needle here, and I'm pricking little holes through the cotton quilting fabric. Next. You can see little loops come up on the back side, and those loops help it attach to the felt, to the wool. Next. So you can see now there on the upper left is the little felted piece that I made as a sample. And it was cut off of the piece on the right. So it didn't shrink that much because the cotton is quite firm. So it kind of held it out there, even though the felt was hard. And it does come through, you can see in the sample on the lower right, it does come through with little fuzzies. So you know that it is attached, and it is very well attached. Next. And then one of my favorite ways to use fabrics that will not work very well with other means of making them attach is to do them as an inclusion. And this is to put them under a very thin, semi-transparent piece of fabric. And I like to use the rarefied silk from the city of Margilan, what we call Margilan silk, although it's just there's a couple of factories in the city of Margilan in Uzbekistan that make this particular silk. And there's a very, very open one. And that one attaches to the wool fiber, and it holds down the fabric if you couldn't get it to attach by itself. And so as the felt shrinks, it causes that fabric to buckle and make interesting shapes. So next. This is a sample showing you what I'm talking about. You see on the left are pieces of cotton cloth and circles and semicircles and so forth laid down on both black and white, because I was going to be doing a scarf in using black and white, and so I wanted to test to see how it would look on each color. In the upper left, it's also been covered. The top part has been covered with black rarefied Margilan silk. The bottom hasn't been covered with the white yet, but that's what I did do. I put black and white over them, and then on the surface, which you can also not see since it wasn't finished yet there, but you can see in the finished piece on the lower right, I also put pre-felts made with heavily felted on viscose. So there was viscose fiber that makes a bubbled up surface. And so that was on there as well. So next. Go ahead, next. So this is what the cotton knit looks like. It's under, in this case, it's under white, white rarefied Margulan silk, and it's on top of black merino wool. And it does have an incredibly wonderful texture. So if you cannot get something to work, try it under something like the rarefied Margulan. That is almost like a miracle to hold things down. So that is the end of the presentation. Thank you. Next, we're done. So we can take questions now. Does Nancy have them?
Let's open it up first for questions.
Yes, faster than I thought. This is that scarf I'm wearing it. This is that area that had the pre-felts made with viscose on them. And then this is the area with the cotton knit, an old cotton knit t-shirt cut up.
Mm. So Patty has a question. Can you unmute yourself?
Hello.
Hi, Patty.
I have a question back on the Tash portraits.
Yes.
So the fabrics were cut out to be the shapes forming face and different elements, but there were some black lines around there. I'm guessing that that's maybe strips of wool helping hold things
Yes.
down, but also
It was, and I don't think she does that anymore. But those were from that particular one. The one called Portraits was from an exhibition she had about 3 years ago, I think, in Portland. But she may not use that now. I found that I don't need to do that now. Right. So
yeah, I've been doing some mosaics with faces where I just use Nuno pre-felt or put a little wool behind the cotton, the cutout shapes. But the black lines were intriguing to me because they did emphasize, her images. Well, thank you very much. I was curious about that.
Anita, can you unmute yourself?
Jamie, hi.
Hi there. Hi, Patricia. I'm curious about protection of beads and sequins that are on different silks or say things that we would thrift when we're doing lots of rubbing and rolling. How do we get that really nice, crisp, thick, fulled felt without doing very much damage to the beads or sequins? It's always been a concern.
I've never had that trouble. Flora, you're here too. You also use sequins in your stuff, sequin fabric. I work carefully. I work it by hand. I sometimes will cover it with plastic and work with a sander, but probably more from the back than from the front on that case.
I feel like sequences have different qualities, and some are more durable and some are very fragile when you felt. So it might not be easy to protect them if they are just poor quality. But once you use good quality sequences or sequenced fabric, then it should work really well. Shouldn't damage in your process. That's my opinion.
Here's the kick panel I was talking about. It's a cotton fabric that you have to take off. And it's so nice, it's basted on. So it's easy to get off.
Yeah, I see Anita Jacobson had a question. And then Janine.
Yeah, I have a couple of them. I'm curious still about that the heavier fabrics where you put the margolin silk over the top.
Yeah.
I am not understanding how it gets that beautiful wrinkly texture versus the rayon that you showed in the beginning where the edges only crinkled. How does the wool come through? I'm not understanding. I can see the texture. I'm not understanding how it does it. Yeah.
Okay, so this was a sampler, and this technique I actually learned from Nina Dimodova, and she's got an online tutorial called Nuno Inclusions, and I do a lot of Nuno. I don't call it Nuno, but I do a lot of inclusions. So anyway, I mean, I've been doing inclusions since I started felting, just because I thought it was cool to put things underneath fabrics and show them through, you know.
Right.
But she was the one that suggested to try different kinds of fabrics to see what would happen.
Sure.
And so this is a tightly woven silk fabric.
Uh-huh. And then you put the margolin over the top of that?
Yes, there's a thin layer of margolin over the top.
Okay. Does the wool come through then, or how does that?
Actually, it's that thin. It was this is margolin gauze.
Okay.
It wasn't even margolin rarefied. And this is that thin quilt batting.
Okay.
But you notice one of the hints she gave, and I didn't do this previously myself, and it was a good hint, was to give a little place in it if you think it's not going to attach very well, so that part of it attaches somewhere from the middle as well as from the outside.
Interesting.
And in this case, I actually cut it into, because it was very, the fiber would not come through it. I cut it in places to allow fiber to come up through.
Okay.
So Pat, did you put fiber on top of the margolin to get it to
That was my
adhere
next
to
question.
the fabric?
No.
Okay, so it came through from underneath the heavier fabric to attach to that?
Right, yes. And this is silk satin.
Mm-hmm.
This actually was just some straight cotton fabric. It was a woven, not a knit.
How the edges, when you use a woven fabric like that cotton, does that ever get fray-y? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
No, that wasn't the woven. This was the knit. I'm sorry. This was the knit. Okay. That's the knit. This is the woven.
Do the edges ever get frayed of the fabric that you're trying to that you're felting on? And if
no, they did on the when I did the sample of that. This one has a little fraying on the edge there.
Okay. Yeah. And do you put wool on the edges, or do you simply lay it on the top?
No wool. And this one, it was just the fabric on top of the wool. The wool's.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Pat.
Yeah. Like here's one that I did, a sample I did that I didn't put in the, but this is a border print on a sari. And interestingly enough, that the ends were more tightly woven and it didn't felt very well. So you can see a whole different pattern structure there.
Yeah.
You see all this whole section, it was more tightly woven.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't felt in, it was kind of cool. I mean, there's something could be done with that idea.
Sure.
Anita, do you have more questions?
Nope, that's it. Thank you very much. I'll mute myself.
Okay, thanks. Janine?
Yeah, hi Pat. I've got a question partly about the quality of merino that you use, the micron. Do you find different micron merinos are more effective when you're doing these inclusions? I've done varying different types myself, but I don't know whether you tend to use superfine merino, sort of like I don't know, a 15, 16, or how higher micron you work with on this?
I'm using 18, 19 usually.
Okay. Okay.
And but like this one, this piece was done with 23 micron, because this was done in the early 90s when I wasn't using superfine or ultrafine or any of the others. And this is an inclusion of yarns under nylon and gauze scarf.
Yeah.
So you know, it's just, I mean, the nylon gauze scarves are really, they're woven and they're really kind of nice. They make this interesting weave. You can see the, I don't know if you can tell it there, but the weave makes this kind of structure that adds to it, which I really enjoy. I was also, this is a sample from that same time period. Again, it's 22 micron.
Okay.
And this is silk organdy, and I ended up not using silk organdy because I didn't like the look that it made. But now I realize that I still don't like white wool coming up through black fabric. It just looks kind of, I don't know, I don't like that white fuzziness. And so what I'm going to come back to organdy, because what I mistook for being the fabric, I think, was with the colors I chose. Because it's not, you know, it's not so bad on the, where it's white on white. And me putting fiber under different kinds of, this was just different kinds of inclusions. Probably about 1990, I was trying different things. Anyway, so it can be done. It can be done with it's still merino.
Yeah,
like
sure.
I showed in that one sample I showed that the Corriedale didn't felt. The Corriedale didn't come up through it at all. You know, and it felted. It actually made felt. This is the other side. It has cheesecloth on the other side, and that's where.
Oops, she's gone.
Sorry, my phone was ringing, which is weird. Anyway, that is the. You can see where I put the different colors underneath. You know, to have them come up. There's a term in doll making called bearding, where fiber comes through the cloth and comes up on the surface. And that's kind of what I was going for here. You know, I wanted the colors that were coming up through to be different than the colors that were surrounding it. Like this one, this polyester fabric has blue coming up through it. And, you know, it's got red behind it. So it was just an experiment to see what would happen. And what happened is that wherever I put the Corriedale, it did not attach. That's what happened.
Another follow-up question to that. If you're using the very fine micron merino, do you find it pills more when you're doing this technique? Because I have had problems with that, where the wool is actually pilling.
Yes, I have seen that, yes.
And what would you do about it? Anything, nothing?
I just try to felt it with a hard enough surface that you're not going to get a lot of pilling.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Thanks.
It is, you know, even commercially made woven fabrics pill. You know, so that's just kind of the way it goes. But you try to make it as good of a quality surface as you can.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Other questions? Anybody? Any experiences using recycled fabrics you want to share? Maybe?
What are your experiences? What are your experiences with it?
Anita, can you unmute yourself first?
Yeah, right. One place that I have found a loosely woven gauze fabric is at the dollar store. And you can get a scarf, you know, not a very big scarf, you know, but a reasonably sized scarf. And they offered, you know, different colors and different varieties. Just thought I'd throw that out. Yeah. I've used that before. Worked well.
Yeah.
I do have problems with the fraying edges.
Well, I think it doesn't bother me. I like the look, so
okay.
I just let it be part of the design.
Okay. It's
You
a
know,
design feature. There you go.
it's a design feature.
Love it. Thank you.
Patty?
Sorry, I couldn't find the hand up thing again, but I just wanted to share one of my favorite stores is in Bellingham. I know we're sort of spread around, but I did an internship a few years ago when I graduated from Western at Rag Finery, and they sell fabrics, recycled fabrics by the pound. And during my internship, I did a lot of studies on different fabrics. And a final project which was made entirely with upcycled, is what we like to call it. And one of the things that I found most important to share, and I don't know if Pat said this or not, but always, always, always when I get home with my stash of finds, I clip a little piece off each one and I make a sample mosaic just to test every one of the fabrics.
Yeah.
It's so important. It can be disheartening to make something large and have things not work, right?
Yeah, like this. Yeah, this was with all different sari fabrics that I had gotten in. Yeah,
Fabulous.
and it's so helpful to have that. It trains your body to understand the materials before you get into a big piece. So I have several boxes. I mean, I was showing you samples from 1990, you know, I have several boxes of samples and I still use them. And they all add to your physical knowledge of the materials.
Yeah. Something I didn't hear you mention that I dearly love to work with is burnout velour. It does have to,
it's just so expensive.
it can be, but if you find it recycled, I just love, you know, when it shrinks, it sort of bubbles up the velour part, and it's so textural. It's one of my favorites. And also even the rhinestone, when you guys were talking about things that are hard to felt down, I've bought rhinestone mesh or tulle before that. A little challenging, but I found if I rolled it in something that gives a little more, normally I'm using a rubber rug mat, but I tried it with bubble wrap and rolled it gently for a long time until the wool grabbed it and it didn't distort it too much. I did lose a couple, but when you do it gently on the raised, elements, it seemed to work better. But that's all I have. Just sharing.
That's wonderful, Patty. Thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this.
It's just nice to see people, isn't it?
Can I just share one other, if you don't mind? Because I did a workshop with Nancy from Treetops in Australia. And we were working with jewelry making, and we were using lots of different, you call them thrift fabrics, we just get them from the charity stores. And she was asking us to use extreme fabrics that we would not normally try. So for example, a woven wool fabric, we call it a Welsh flannel type of fabric. I've got a sample here that I was trying out different materials.
Ooh, nice.
This one here is actually a heavyweight, and this one is a coat fabric, a woven wool coat fabric. There's nothing on it, it's just felted onto a superfine merino.
Just on by itself. It has the same look as the cotton.
Absolutely.
Cotton
That's
knit
underneath
the
quilting fabric, and there's a lace fabric here. So when you said sampling, that's exactly what this was. The whole piece was a sample of what extreme fabrics you can use that you think, no way.
It is amazing.
And
it's amazing what people can use. Yeah. And
it was a lot of rubbing, but go on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just so pleased with myself that I started felting before there were so many rules.
Yeah.
You know, it's really helpful. It's really helpful to just try something. You know, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, you have a sample. It didn't work. Right? You know, so not knowing like people who tell me people who don't know I'm a felt maker and will tell me, well, you can only use silk and wool for felting. That's all. Only silk. And I say, I use nylon and polyester, you know, all kinds of other things. Yeah, I mean, you have to try it. There's silks that wouldn't work well, you know. You have to try it, but Yeah. I love your sample, Janine.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful.
It was quite useful because I had that draped over a chair when I was doing an open studio, and somebody saw it and commissioned me to make cushions with her own fabric from her upholstery in her room. So she chose the fabrics, and I had like
Nice.
different fabrics. But had I not had that sample there, which was really just to explain to people what you can and can't use, as you say, break the rules. And I keep it and I love it. And one of these days I'm going to frame it and put it on the wall. I just love the textures I've got.
Yeah.
The only thing that didn't work for me was a satin fabric, because the
That's
wall
harder. Yeah.
it just slid off at the end. It just pulled off.
Do you know how satin fabrics are made?
It's to do with the weave, obviously, but
well, it is the most closely set group of warps and wefts that are possible in weaving. So, you know, if you're normally weaving, I was a weaver before I was a felt maker, right? So if you're normally weaving over, under, that's every other thread is, you know, moving. This one is like they are right up next to each other, right up next to each other. So it's so dense. It's just a heavy fabric. So I wonder if pricking it with the felting needles would help.
It might, but then I found that tends to shatter the fabric if you're not careful, and if you don't want that effect, if you don't want to split your fabric, then
it might.
Over the top of this, this was just pure fabric on wall. I know.
Might use a smaller needle.
Yeah. But thanks for that. Yeah, it's good.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh my goodness, we're going to be done ahead of time.
Not by much, Pat.
Yeah.
I just want to remind people that our next session, we'll just have a short introduction, and then we'll have our group from the Pacific Northwest felt makers. They're available to answer questions regarding lightweight fabrics and garment making. So that will be on October 9th. Please register if you're interested. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, everybody. It was very nice seeing you and all the feedbacks. Thank you. So hope to see you guys next week.
Yes, next week. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Pat and Flora, why don't you stay on?
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Patty. I hear your voice. Bye-bye, everyone.